We often think of our neighbors as people we can trust, but not all neighbors are friendly. Some harbor dark secrets and evil intentions. Story number 1. In the heart of Philadelphia's bustling city life, amidst the towering skyscrapers and the ceaseless hum of urban existence, resided James Michael. His life, though unremarkable, was a peaceful haven in the chaos of the city, until the day a new neighbor moved in next door. The newcomer, a man named Oswald, was an enigma shrouded in an unsettling aura. His skin was pale, like the moonlit underbelly of a mushroom, and his eyes held an unsettling glint that sent shivers down James's spine. Oswald worked as a pizza delivery boy, a profession that allowed him to blend seamlessly into the fabric of the city, his movements cloaked in the anonymity of the night. From the moment Oswald arrived, James sensed an unsettling presence, a palpable darkness that seeped from the man like a noxious fume. One evening, James's curiosity got the better of him. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Oswald than met the eye, a sinister secret hidden beneath his unassuming exterior. As Oswald left for his nightly pizza delivery rounds, James decided to follow him, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. James tailed Oswald through the labyrinthine alleyways and deserted streets of Philadelphia, his footsteps barely audible against the backdrop of the city's night symphony. Oswald's route led him to a dilapidated warehouse, its windows boarded up and its paint peeling, a stark contrast to the bustling city around it. James watched from a distance as Oswald entered the warehouse, his curiosity gnawing at him. He crept closer, his senses heightened, his breath held captive in his lungs. Through a crack in the boarded-up window, James witnessed a scene that would forever haunt his dreams. Oswald stood in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by a circle of hooded figures, their faces obscured by the shadows. In the middle of the circle stood a large metal table, upon which lay a figure draped in a white sheet. James's heart pounded in his chest, his mind struggling to comprehend the macabre scene before him. He watched in horror as Oswald lifted the sheet, revealing the lifeless body of a young woman, her eyes wide open, her face frozen in a mask of terror. We continue the stories, but before that, please like this video and subscribe my channel for more horror stories. The hooded figures chanted in an unknown tongue, their voices echoing through the warehouse, sending a chill down James's spine. Oswald raised a knife, its blade glinting in the dim light, and plunged it into the woman's chest. A sickening scream pierced the silence, followed by a chorus of guttural laughter. James could no longer bear to witness the horrors unfolding before him. He stumbled back, his mind reeling, his body trembling with fear. He ran through the night, his footsteps echoing through the deserted streets, his heart pounding in his chest, the image of the lifeless woman forever etched in his mind. James knew he had to tell someone about what he had seen, but fear paralyzed him. He knew that Oswald was no ordinary pizza delivery boy. He was a monster, a creature of darkness. James was trapped in a web of fear and silence, his world forever changed by the horrors he had witnessed. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. James lived in a constant state of paranoia, his every shadow a potential menace. He couldn't shake the feeling that Oswald was watching him, that he knew what James had seen. One night, James couldn't bear the silence any longer. He had to tell someone, had to expose Oswald's evil. He called the police, his voice trembling as he recounted the horrors he had witnessed. The police took his statement, but their skepticism was evident. They dismissed his story as a product of his imagination, the ramblings of a disturbed mind. James's world crumbled around him. The police's disbelief only fueled his fear, and the isolation became unbearable. He withdrew from the world, a prisoner of his own terror. One day, James decided to confront Oswald. He couldn't live in fear any longer. He had to face the monster that haunted his dreams. James approached Oswald's house, his heart pounding in his chest. He knocked on the door, his hand trembling. Oswald answered the door, his eyes gleaming with an eerie light. He recognized James immediately, a knowing smile spreading across his pale face. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice a chilling whisper. James tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Oswald stepped closer, his eyes boring into James's soul. "You're one of us now," he said, his voice a venomous hiss. James's world turned black, his consciousness fading into the abyss. Story number 2. The city of Dallas, Texas, was a bustling metropolis, full of life and energy. But in the quiet suburb of Oak Cliff, there was a house that stood out from the rest, a house that seemed to exude an aura of darkness and despair. The house was home to the mysterious and reclusive Mr. Abernathy, a man who was rumored to be involved in the occult. Caleb David, a young boy of 12, had recently moved to Oak Cliff with his family. He was immediately drawn to the Abernathy house, its dark windows and overgrown yard beckoning him like a siren song. Despite his parents' warnings, Caleb couldn't resist the urge to explore the house. One Saturday afternoon, Caleb snuck out of his house and made his way to the Abernathy property. He peered through a gap in the fence and saw that the backyard was overgrown with weeds and bushes. The house itself was shrouded in shadows, its windows like empty eye sockets staring out at him. Caleb climbed over the fence and crept towards the house. He could hear a strange noise coming from inside, a low humming that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. He pressed his ear against the front door and listened. The humming was louder now, accompanied by a faint chanting voice. Caleb's heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to run away, but something held him back. He had to find out what was going on inside the house. He carefully turned the doorknob and the door creaked open. Caleb stepped inside and was immediately enveloped by darkness. He could barely see his hand in front of his face. He stumbled through the house, feeling his way along the walls. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Caleb could hear the chanting voice growing louder, closer. He finally reached the source of the sound, a dimly lit room at the end of the hallway. The room was filled with strange symbols and arcane artifacts. In the center of the room stood Mr. Abernathy, his eyes glowing with an eerie green light. Mr. Abernathy turned to face Caleb, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "Welcome, child," he said in a raspy voice. "I've been expecting you." Caleb was terrified, but he couldn't look away from Mr. Abernathy's glowing eyes. He felt a strange power emanating from the man, a power that was both terrifying and seductive. Mr. Abernathy held out his hand towards Caleb. "Join me," he said. "Together, we can unlock the secrets of the universe." Caleb hesitated, torn between his fear and his curiosity, but then he remembered all the strange things that had been happening in Oak Cliff. The disappearing pets, the unexplained noises, the children who had gone missing without a trace. He knew that he had to stop Mr. Abernathy, no matter what the cost. Caleb lunged at Mr. Abernathy, grabbing him by the arm. "Let them go!" he shouted. Mr. Abernathy laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "You're too late, child," he said. "The ritual is complete." Caleb felt a surge of energy coursing through his body. He could hear the voices of the missing children echoing in his mind. He closed his eyes and focused all his energy on Mr. Abernathy. The man screamed in agony as Caleb's power overwhelmed him. Mr. Abernathy collapsed to the floor, his body dissolving into dust. The room was filled with a blinding light, and then everything went dark. Caleb woke up on the floor of the Abernathy house. The room was empty. The strange symbols and artifacts had vanished. He crawled to his feet and stumbled out of the house. He ran as fast as he could, not daring to look back. When he finally reached home, he collapsed into his parents' arms, sobbing uncontrollably. He told them everything that had happened: the strange house, the chanting voice, the battle with Mr. Abernathy. His parents were horrified, but they believed him. They knew that their son had just faced evil and emerged victorious. The Abernathy house was torn down the next day. The ground where it once stood was salted and burned to prevent the evil that had lurked there from ever returning. Caleb David and his family moved back to the city, leaving Oak Cliff behind. But the events of that night would never be forgotten. Caleb had faced true evil and emerged a hero. Story number 3. Ashley Nicole, a young woman with a passion for writing, had recently moved to the quaint town of Clearwater, Florida, seeking tranquility and inspiration for her craft. She had rented a charming cottage on a quiet street, nestled amidst lush greenery and the soothing sounds of nature. Little did she know that her idyllic new home harbored a sinister secret, one that would soon transform her peaceful existence into a terrifying nightmare. Ashley's neighbor, a reclusive and eccentric man named Mr. Crowley, was an enigma to the neighborhood. His dilapidated house, shrouded in an air of mystery, stood as a stark contrast to the vibrant surroundings. Whispers of his strange behavior and penchant for collecting oddities circulated among the locals, adding to his aura of peculiarity. Despite the unsettling rumors, Ashley found herself drawn to Mr. Crowley. His enigmatic persona piqued her curiosity, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of intrigue towards the enigmatic figure. One evening, driven by an insatiable curiosity, Ashley decided to introduce herself to her peculiar neighbor. Mr. Crowley's home was a labyrinth of dimly lit rooms filled with an assortment of bizarre artifacts and cryptic symbols. Ashley found herself drawn to the collection, her artistic mind fascinated by the strange beauty of the objects. As Mr. Crowley regaled her with tales of their origins, Ashley couldn't shake off a growing sense of unease. Over the following weeks, Ashley and Mr. Crowley developed an unlikely friendship. They would spend hours discussing art, literature, and the occult, Ashley captivated by Mr. Crowley's vast knowledge and unconventional perspectives. However, as their bond deepened, Ashley began to notice disturbing changes in her neighbor's behavior. Mr. Crowley's once articulate speech became increasingly cryptic, his eyes filled with an unsettling intensity. His fascination with the occult grew more pronounced, and he began to make unsettling allusions to ancient rituals and dark forces. Ashley's initial fascination with Mr. Crowley began to morph into a gnawing fear. One night, Ashley was awakened by a series of blood-curdling screams echoing from Mr. Crowley's house. Overcome with dread, she rushed to her neighbor's home, only to find the door unlocked and the interior shrouded in an unnatural darkness. As she cautiously ventured inside, a chilling sensation swept over her, the air thick with an oppressive silence. Suddenly, an unseen force slammed the door shut, plunging Ashley into darkness. Panic-stricken, she fumbled for her phone, its flashlight illuminating the room. Before her eyes, a grotesque figure materialized, its form contorted and grotesque, its eyes glowing with an unholy light. Ashley's blood ran cold as the figure lunged towards her, its claws outstretched. She screamed, her voice echoing through the silent house. The figure pinned her to the ground, its icy breath chilling her skin. Just as she braced herself for the inevitable, a blinding light erupted from the room, momentarily stunning the creature. Ashley seized the opportunity and scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding in her chest. She bolted towards the front door, the creature's enraged cries echoing behind her. She burst through the door and into the night, the creature's pursuit fading into the distance. Ashley's encounter with the demonic entity left her shaken and traumatized. She sought the help of the police, but they dismissed her story as the ravings of a disturbed mind. With no one to believe her, Ashley was left to grapple with the terrifying reality of her experience. The once charming cottage became a prison of fear, every creak and groan of the old house a reminder of the horrors she had witnessed. Ashley's dreams were haunted by the grotesque figure, its chilling presence casting a pall over her waking hours. Desperate to escape the clutches of her terror, Ashley decided to leave Clearwater, seeking refuge in a new city, a new life, far from the sinister secret that lurked within the walls of her old home. As she drove away, she glanced back at the dilapidated cottage, a chilling reminder of the darkness that resided within. Thanks for watching my video about 3 neighbor horror stories. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more horror stories. Before you go, I want to leave you with one final thought. We often think of our neighbors as people we can trust and rely on. But as these stories have shown, not all neighbors are friendly. Some harbor dark secrets and evil intentions. So next time you see your neighbor, take a moment to consider what you really know about them. You never know what lurks behind their closed doors. Good night and sleep tight.